Hey now, happy Thursday. Good morning, PSW staff, clients, and friends joining us. It was fun being at the studio yesterday and fun talking about Steve Jobs, the movie, that scene. Already the results look really good. You found something upbeat, electronic score. We've done quite a few electronic scores, but this is kind of upbeat momentum. This is this is a very kind of pensive electronic score, right? This is kind of like, you know, like it's not super, you're not sure if he can do it yet. So it's kind of like, you know, he's grinding, he's still resisting. There's still all these kind of hurdles ahead. So we're going to see that tomorrow. Today, I really, really want to talk about such a left field, the LA Times and the building, and take a look at and revisit our class on the beautiful building. And we're going to look at the Times building. The Times Mirror Square, that's what it's called, but that's a mouthful. So it's just the Times building. There were two complexes added, so it takes kind of a whole block. One added in 1948, the other added in 1973. So it's kind of bounded by Spring and Broadway, 1st and 2nd. Very close to City Hall. So back in the day, you could find out the dirt at City Hall and go across the street and write about it. So it was all, you know, very interconnected. So kind of cool. Of course, all of LA development starts downtown, as we've talked about, because of the LA River and the Arroyo Seco, as opposed to by the beach. So it was a water problem. We've had a lot of problems with water in the city, and we'll talk about some of those. So it's a really nice Art Deco building, right? It's beautiful. 1935, but does anyone think that's when the Times started? Of course not. You know, I mean, just like City Hall was around way before that building was erected, but we're just going by these, you know, we're looking at some of these beautiful buildings, but designed by Gordon Kaufman. We know Gordon Kaufman, Gordy, right? Now, he designed Greystone Mansion in 1928, which is that beautiful home that Edward Doheny gave to his son and his wife for their wedding. He also did Santa Anita Park, which we're going to look at. That was 1934. And then 1940, he did the Hollywood Palladium, which we did a whole class on like a few years ago. So great architect, and also responsible a lot for the Hoover Dam. The same year this is built, 1935. So why don't we get up our timeline, because I spent all night working on it. So we'll just go with 1935 for this building, but this is mostly, a lot of LA development has already happened. This is, of course, after City Hall, after Greystone Mansion, just like I mentioned, after the Hollywood sign, of course, after the Biltmore. And the Biltmore and the Hollywood sign we're going to take a look at a little bit later in this class, because we can't talk about LA development without talking about Harry Chandler. So we'll talk about Harry Chandler in a little bit. It's actually, there was a bombing, not in this building, but across the street in 1910, because that's where they had a few buildings prior to this one, by a union member, because Harrison Gray Otis was anti-union. Who is Harrison Gray Otis? Don't think I just said that without trying to introduce him. This guy fought in the Civil War. He was started in newspapers at age 14. Real roughneck. Some of these guys are going to be roughnecks. They're into power. It's scary, but they did a lot of good development for our city, but probably made a lot of people mad, so including the Unionists, because yeah, they bombed and killed 21 newspapermen in 1910, injured about 100 people. It was a terrible blow to the city. Harrison moved from Santa Barbara to become the paper's editor, and this is, so the first LA Times article comes out in 1881, December 4th, just in case you were wondering. So by 1882, Harrison Gray Otis is taken over, and this is when the dynasty starts up for the next 100 years or so. It's kind of a monopoly on the town. This begins the first generation of this dynasty of the local paper. Back then, these people were interested in power and profits and political influence. Scary terms, but they saw LA as this playground that they had to control, because people were coming out. Why? Because of the railroad. 1880s, people are coming in droves, and they want more people to come out because that's more money for them. So they had interest in LA development. And then this little kid, Harry Chandler, starts coming and delivering newspapers under Harrison Gray. They kind of start pairing up. Harrison's his mentor, and then he finally gives the Times over to Harry, because Harry marries his daughter. So it's Harrison Gray Otis, and then his son-in-law Harry. They really are important in developing LA from the 1890s to the 1910s. I mean, Harrison dies in 1917, but prior to that, Harry and Harrison are very important with stealing the water from the Owens Valley, which we talked about with Mulholland. There were like 10 people, it was very small, that profited tremendously from the city. But then so did we. We got water, we needed water. From the Owens River to San Fernando. That's what's happening. Also, Harrison Gray Otis was the one that gave Charles Lummis a job, when he walked from Ohio to Los Angeles. And he said, when you get here, write down all your travels, send them over, we'll publish them, but when you get here, you can become the first editor. So we already know Lummis, we have all these friends that we've done classes on that we've met. Otis dies in 1917. So that's when Harry Chandler takes control of the Times. And this is the Chandler dynasty really beginning. Chandler was a ruthless, powerful man, but did a lot of great things. Like what? I mean, do you ask? I mean, he was responsible for a lot of development. Hollywood Bowl, which we did a class on, so that's art. Caltech, he was responsible for. Science. The Coliseum for the Olympics, so sports. The Biltmore and the Ambassador hotels. He made these things possible. And so that's where foreign people could come and politicians could come and give speeches, which they did. Santa Anita Park, gambling, the Hollywood sign, real estate. I mean, just those things he was responsible for. Otis helped him a little bit, but Otis had passed away. But gave him so even if he was ruthless, those are huge to art, science, sports, politics. He created all of these things for us. I think making a lot of people upset, but of course, important to our development. So after he gives his son, Norman Chandler, I know it's a lot of names, gives him the paper. So Norman starts taking it over post-war Los Angeles. Norman's a little softer. He's still a tyrant, but he does things like he's one of the first newspapers to give the employees health benefits and pensions, and he really tried to foster the community, all the Times writers and the editorial, writers and the cartoonist community. And so he was good. He was good with that. And of course, his wife is somebody who we've talked about, Dorothy Buffum Chandler, not Monique, another Buffum. His wife was ruthless, and perhaps even more so than him. I mean, but again, we have a lot to thank her for. I mean, she valued music a lot, and just like a first lady would with the president, she had her own causes. She took up civic causes, artistic causes, and they created the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, and she created the Music Center, which opened in 1964, which we looked at. She also saved the Hollywood Bowl from being demolished in the 50s. She was amazing. She was amazing at fundraising. Ruthless, though. I mean, was so into telling people, no, give this money back. They need to give more money, including to people like Kirk Douglas, Charlton Heston. She would say, you need to give us more money. So ruthless, but I mean, some good causes. So Dorothy Chandler, pretty amazing woman. So Norman and Dorothy's son, Otis, takes over the Times. So, I mean, this is the dynasty, continuing. Otis is much calmer. He's a surfer. He likes the beach. But he takes control of the Times and gives it more of a national perspective and international focus. It becomes it always was, but it becomes a much more legitimate newspaper. That's from about 1960 to 1980. And then around 2000, the Chandler, they sold it to Tribune Company. So a lot, we're just summing up briefly because there's so many stories about the Chandlers and how they created LA. They really did create LA. But yeah, it's too bad because that building had all of the LA Times journalists, and up until 2018, people were working there until the owners were unable to reach a new lease agreement because they increased their rent $1 million a month. That's a pretty hefty increase. So about 800 employees had to relocate. So now most of the Times writers work, well, maybe they work remotely now, but in El Segundo, that's what the new owner decided to. So Ani Group is a Canadian developer, and so they took over the Times from the Tribune, and today they want to create some high rises, 53-story building, and about with 1,000 apartments, and then 24 moderate income, and then 10 low-income units. How could 10 low-income units help this homeless problem? What is that, like 10 people? I mean, so I don't know so much about what's going to be happening around the, I mean, the building, I don't think they're going to destroy that, but they're going to build some high rises right around it, which will probably take away a lot of the glamour, because we talked about the US Bank Tower last week and how it was so tall, you know, but they didn't want another Manhattan. They wanted to keep all the buildings at a, lower height. Of course, that changed in the 1960s, but a lot of these high-rises might, it's good to house people, but they might take away a lot of the aesthetic quality and stuff. So right now it's just a vacant building, the Times, unfortunately, but at least it's not torn down. But it's used for movie shoots. That's what a lot of people film there for. So that's a quick, we did a lot of information right there, just about the Times building, about Otis, Harrison Gray Otis, about the Chandler dynasty, about how much development they gave to the city. I'm a Times subscriber. I've been for about 10 years, and yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. But I don't think you asked me that question, did you? I mean, I don't know why I shared that. It doesn't make me better or anything. So interesting to hear all about the Chandler dynasty. Harrison Gray Otis, Harry Chandler. I know there was a lot of Chandler names, but this was a dynasty. They controlled us. They're pretty much, the dynasty I think is kind of gone now. There's probably relatives. There's relatives still around, but mostly it's in somebody else's hands. There was a book called Bad City that I just finished. Pringle was this great journalist, and you should check out the book. It's all about this USC scandal and about how they tried to, and editors at the Times tried to shut it down. And I think the owner of the Times actually stood up for this guy. This will never stop. People, journalists, braver journalists, including a brave journalist for our paper, the LA Times. This just happened a few years ago, trying to get stories out, and stories being crushed by editors that had conflicting interest, editors that were in the pockets of politicians at UCLA, at USC. Newspapers are such an important part of society without the free press and all that stuff. So I thought it was really important to share that. And it's such a beautiful building, that Times building, even though most of them are in El Segundo. I wanted to reshare that. So tomorrow, Film Score and Results for Steve Jobs. And that's going to be that. Okay, have a great rest of the day. See you tomorrow. Bye.